Thank you all for coming out this evening. I'm excited to be here. My first time. I've heard so much about this space, and it is a delight. What a lovely audience and stage. So I'm going to open my set with a work by Cindy Horseman, who is a living female composer, and a delight to learn her creative ideas on the instrument. This is Angelica. This next number is by Brandy Younger, who's a fantastic jazz harpist, and she's very much influenced by the jazz harpists from the 1940s, Dorothy Ashby, or 1920s and 30s rather, Dorothy Ashby and then Alice Coltrane, who was John Coltrane's wife. They both did a mixture of kind of jazz and freestyle form. So this is Brandy Younger's Essence of Ruby. Thank you. That second piece was actually another jazz tune by Cindy Horseman, and I learned the second one and realized they really fused well together. And I find it fun to play syncopated music that has jazz chords in them when that's not just a jazz standard, because we all love jazz standards, but sometimes it's nice to take a break and try something a little bit different. So you might be wondering, am I going to be joined by a second harpist? And unfortunately, I'm not going to be, but there is a second harp on stage. And that's because I really like having access to all 12 major keys and their relative minors. So instead of transposing pieces like I could do, I choose to just look at whatever key the piece is in, and then the piece essentially chooses the harp. So this harp is tuned in D flat major, and that harp is tuned in F major. So now I'm going to switch harps for this next individual work that's by a French harpist from the 1800s. During my degree program, I really enjoyed finding works from a variety of centuries, shall we say, and eras and styles, and seeing how they translated to the harp. In some cases, they are very much written for pedal harp, or very often keyboard or piano, depending on the era. So this next one was written for harp by Alfonso Hasselmann, and then it was reworked by Theodore Labate, and it's called Caprice. And there's a series of etudes he wrote. This is etude number 7. So I'll be switching harps now. you. I find that piece quite delightful. It just, everywhere it goes, it brings this lighthearted energy. This next one is the very, very famous Camille Saint-Saëns' The Swan, and he wrote Carnival of Animals, which was a series of essentially tributes to different animals. And allegedly he didn't want them to be performed in his lifetime, but fortunately after he passed, we've gotten to hear all of the works on many occasions. So he originally wrote this for piano and cello, but here is both of those voices in one. This next one, I'm going to switch harps again, but it's by a female composer who was living in the 1940s and 50s, and she was the harpist for PBS. And she loved to compose, but she also loved to find every possible composer to encourage them to write for harp. Her name's Pearl Chertok, and she wrote this series titled Around the Clock, and this is her Beige Nocturne from that series. I enjoy that piece a lot because I feel like it shows off so much of what we love about the harp in a way that's not too harpy. And for all those harp players out there, you know what I mean. A gliss and an arpeggio on a harp is used so often because it's so effective on the instrument. And the way she used the instrument both showcases it as a beautiful instrument in that capacity as a classical sound, but also all the places it can go in mood and style. So I'm going to close my first set with a work by Francois Joseph Noderman. He wrote many sonatinas. He wrote 7 sonatinas in a particular book that I got from my teacher, and I kind of started to work my way through them all. And they work really well on lever harp just because of the tone I feel like I can get on these harps. And in particular, this harp, because of course it has 3 flats, so the piece chooses the harp. But this is Francois Joseph Noderman's Sonatina number 4, and he was alive in the 1800s, or rather more specifically composing these works in the 1800s, born in the late 1700s. But as a harp player, he understood the instrument, which is always so fun. So this is his Sonatina number 4. I didn't include that there were 2 movements. I'll do that next time. So I'm going to give about a 10-minute break, 10, 15 minutes, so everyone can refill their glasses. And I do have some CDs in the back, so I'm going to set those up as well. Thank you again all for being here, and come back in about 10, 15 for a second set. Thank you so much, Artotoke Music. often find that it's most of the audience members' favorites, so we'll see what happens tonight. This work is by Philip Glass, and he writes a vast amount of music, so this may be very different than your association with him. He wrote a series of metamorphoses, and there were 5 metamorphoses in this particular album that he put out in 1988. And it was inspired by Kafka's book, Metamorphosis. And he really takes this idea of the slow but steady shift and change. It's kind of like watching a caterpillar change into a butterfly, right? So I think he captures it really well. It's written for piano, but of course, piano and harp have many similarities, and this is one of them. So enjoy Metamorphosis 2 by Philip Glass.
So for any of you out there that want to play that piece, all I do, my only trick is I retune the low C to an A, so you get that really low A octave in the bass, because that's a huge part of the work. You can't really skip it. And of course, Glass didn't write for the, well, it works on pedal harp, but on lever harp, we don't usually have that low A. So, while I have enjoyed for the past while now playing a lot of chromatic as well as classical repertoire, many of us know that the harp in Central and South America is very much celebrated and played exceptionally well, and primarily by men with long nails. It's its own fantastic tradition. The wood is different, the string type is different, the spacing is different, the coloring is different. The blues here are Fs, and on many Latin American harps, they are a C. So if you go to Central and South America and they say, oh, play harp, you play harp, play my harp. Don't look at the strings, just play. I tried the other way, and you can imagine the results. But this next tune was taught to me orally, like much of the tradition in most of the countries south. And the composer actually didn't write it down. He just part of his repertoire. It was his original piece. Why write it? I'm just going to keep playing it, right? His name's Carlos Reyes, and he is well known in the Bay Area for both his exceptional playing on the violin as well as his macho harp playing. Once you've heard him, you will not forget him. This is his piece titled Harp Ortiz, and it was composed in honor of another Paraguayan colleague and harpist, Alfredo Ortiz. But I really like this work because it really highlights what's so beautiful about Latin American music, and in my case, played with pads, because I don't have long nails, and not played on a Paraguayan harp. But aside from that, here's Harp Ortiz. I wish I had a Paraguayan harp with me, but those harps are so very different. It would not feel the same to play on them. I actually have one at home. My first harp teacher gave me one and said, well, maybe you'll play more Latin American music on this harp. But as you know, as a harp player, to keep more than one harp in tune is its own feat, and clearly I'm doing that. So that one has become...
Taller, right? More strings.
It's become living room furniture, sadly. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's fun to play jazz-inspired pieces, but other times it's just fun to play jazz standards. So here's Take 5. This is one of the first jazz standards I figured out on the lever harp and wrote out for some friends because they said, can you really play Take 5? And the truth is, it works really well with a chamber ensemble because, as we know, we can't easily shift levers and play at the same time with the same hand that we're shifting. However, with a little bit of creativity, you can do a lot. So here's my rendition for solo harp. one, especially the B section. It's kind of fun. I was doing a research paper on Take 5, and many of us know the piece based on the Dave Brubeck quintet that made it popular, but it wasn't actually Dave who wrote it. It was his saxophonist, Paul Desmond, and they had been touring in Turkey and Istanbul and hearing a lot of odd meter music, which at that time was very cool and different. We're all used to the 4/4, 6/8, you know, where we can follow and dance with, but they were hearing 7 and 9 and 11/8. So Dave said to Paul, why don't you write something in odd meter? And he wasn't coming up with too much, but he had 2 basic sketches, and of course that became the A and the B section. And we know in jazz that once you have the main melody, you can kind of go anywhere with that and then return to it, and that's what catches us and reminds us that, oh yeah, that's Take 5. So it hit the top charts, as we all know, and the rest is history. But I find that one a very fun one to play because it really, again, like many of the other pieces, showcases what the levers can do when put to good use. So I'm going to actually play an original now because I also compose. And for a long time, I played with a lot of chamber groups, and we played a lot of original music. But it's nice to sometimes take a break from it and explore the mind of other creative individuals from all the different centuries. But this one I wrote during my time living abroad and working at a music school in South Africa, in the township outside of Cape Town, Guguletu Township. And just like where I'm from, the Bay Area, it was just a melting pot of cultures and ideas. And this came to me as a solo harp part, which has morphed into duo, trio format, etc. But here is the original Serendipity. actually thinking now because I didn't know originally if I was going to do one whole set or 2 sets. But earlier today, I had the pleasure of working with some awesome harp players that are in the audience, and we chatted about playing Ave Maria or Bach's Ave Maria on lever harp. So I think I'm actually going to play that for you all to hear it. Do we have any singers in the audience that want to join? Was that a yes? This was actually one of the first chromatic pieces I played on lever harp. It was such a nice venture into lever shifting. And I actually should take a moment to talk about these levers because half the audience at least plays harp and knows what these are. But for anyone that doesn't, I call the levers the black keys on the piano. They're the same thing, except when you're playing piano, you can go right or left. So you can get the flats or the sharps. As we know, D sharp is also E flat. But on lever harp, how it's set up is that whatever you tune the string to, you can only go up a half step. Unlike pedal harp where you have 3 different notches, so you have flat, natural, and sharp. So for me, I've tuned this harp with 1 flat, and then, as I said with that harp, I have 5 flats all the way down to D flat major. But what this string C means on this harp, or rather, in this case, D, for example, I tune this to D natural, and then I put up the lever, and I get a D sharp. But on that harp, when I play the D, it's actually a D flat. So the idea is, I always said, for pedal players out there, you know you have your little diagram that tells you what pedals to put down before you start playing. And I use a similar diagram, so I mostly keep track of levers. There's ones that get away from me at times, but overall, it's a fun game. And I didn't actually start lever shifting until probably 8 years ago. I started working with a lot of classical musicians, and they just bring this great, Chopin's Prelude No. 4, Debussy, Ravel, all these really great works, and they'd give me the piano part, and I'd look at it and think, that sounds so beautiful, but that does not really work on lever harp. So fortunately, when you work with chamber groups, you can give the different parts to the different musicians. So I started finding ways to actually play the music, hand off parts when I couldn't play the section or the phrase to a different musician. And then it was all possible. So that's been a very fun project, kind of life project of what is viable on lever harp and what adjustments do you need to make so that you can make music for the listener. So here's Bach's Prelude No. 1 in C. give you another original. This one is titled Counterpoint. I may be speaking into the mic. This one's titled Counterpoint, and it was an original, again, I wrote many years ago, and have since arranged for different chamber collaborations. So again, that was a very Latin-inspired original composition. So I actually don't have anything else on this program for you. However, since you're all here and I'm here, I shouldn't ask for requests because we know where that can go. Oh, sorry, I can't play that. That is exactly where that can go. So, I'm just gonna look through my music for a moment because, let's see. My cheat sheet. Let's see. Or rather, I should ask, do you want more music? Versus me just keep playing for you. So for harp teachers out there, these pieces are all available on harp column music, and they're in various formats, different levels. But when the pandemic hit, I decided to write out a number of my original works that I thought other harp players might want to learn, and that was one of the many positive elements of being in lockdown. So again, thank you all for coming out this evening. I do have some CDs, so just come talk to me. There's a couple chamber groups, as well as one that I just released a couple weeks ago that I essentially recorded all of my master's degree recitals, and then I selected 20 pieces to put on an album to kind of showcase the range of what lever harp can do, from Scarlatti's sonatas to the glass work and the jazz tune by Brandy Younger, as well as Pearl Chertok's Beige Nocturne. So gives you a sense for where the lever harp is going, as well as where it is currently. So again, thank you so much to Artichoke Music for having me this evening. This is such a great space, and I'm so glad to know about it and have played here now. And thanks to all of you for filling the room. Have a wonderful Sunday evening.